Do you know what I really hate? Going to the doctor. I hate it. I hate being there. I've been in more doctor's offices than I care to ever be in the entire rest of my existence on this earth. But there is one redeeming quality to going to the doctor, and you know what that is? It's that they have latex gloves. My wife is a nurse and almost a nurse practitioner, and she always yells at me when I go to the doctor's office and I swipe one of the latex gloves and put it on my hand. She thinks I'm like a child, but that's because she doesn't know that all the cool kids do that. But what are latex gloves for? Well, they're to create a barrier between the doctor or nurse's hand and the sick patient, right? To create a barrier so that the disease doesn't get past. But one thing that I'm really thankful for is that we don't have a latex gloves kind of savior. In our last video, we talked about Matthew chapter 8 and the leper that Jesus heals. And I want to return to that in this video. There's a man who comes to Jesus when Jesus is coming down from the Sermon on the Mount. He kneels before him and he says, "Lord, if you will, you can make me clean." And Jesus says, "I will be clean." And what's interesting is that Jesus then reaches down and he touches the man during his healing process. And that's interesting for a couple reasons. The first one is because probably the last thing that you want to do with a person who has leprosy is touch them. And the crowd was probably somewhat stunned by what Jesus was doing, because even they knew that you don't touch somebody with leprosy, otherwise you might end up with leprosy. The second reason it's shocking is because Jesus didn't have to touch people to heal them. In fact, in the very next passage that we're going to study later down in the chapter, Jesus heals a man who's not even in the vicinity of Jesus. He just speaks the word and he's healed. But what happens is that Jesus reaches down and he touches the man, and rather than contracting the man's disease, Jesus actually cleanses the man of his sickness. And the reason I bring this up is because I think that this is really beautifully representative of who Jesus is. Now, I didn't see this when I first read the text, but after thinking about it a while, it became a little clearer. Think about this. Jesus is not a separated Savior from us. Right? There's no barrier between him and us. In fact, Jesus came down to the earth to touch the very things that we touch in this physical world, and to be touched by the emotions of both himself and the people who are around him, and to be touched by the sorrows and the difficulties and the struggles and temptations that all human beings are touched with. What's also important to remember is that there is a disease that's rampant in the world, and it's a disease that kills people spiritually, and it's sin, and it's something that every single human being has a problem with and needs help with curing. So Jesus comes down from heaven to touch and to be a part of a sin-sick world. But what's interesting is that just like in our story, it happens the same way. Jesus does not contract the sin sickness of humanity, but rather in touching the world, he cleanses it. And what occurred to the leper there in Matthew chapter 8 is really the same offer that still exists, and that is that if you come to Jesus in obedience, he can cleanse you of your sin. The leper's encounter with Jesus took his fate from death to life. And so it is that our encounter with Christ will do the same thing. Thank you for watching the video. If you have not subscribed to the channel, do that on YouTube. Comment down below and make sure to share the video so as many people can see it as possible. Take care.